Please welcome our guests, Julie Rice and Spencer Rice. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. Great to have you both here. The whole Rice family is here.
That's right.
Yes, our children are very excited to hear this again.
Hear that again.
Yeah, let's just play that on a loop. Welcome back. Please introduce your lovely daughters. I had the chance to spend a couple hours with them. What are their names?
This is Phoebe, and she's 14. When we started SoulCycle, Phoebe was 5 months old. And this is Parker, she's 8.
And Phoebe is the person we're really interested in talking to today because Phoebe's a high school freshman and she is interested in attending USC. So we want to make sure she feels very welcome to USC. So any questions you have, you've got plenty of people who can answer them for her. So it's great to have you guys here as a family.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll show you something new that you haven't heard or seen before. That's right. So very interesting. You know, we've had a couple people that have worked as husband and wife, best friend, all those things. So let's get that out of here fairly quickly. What are the advantages and disadvantages of working with a spouse?
Well, let me start off by saying that Spencer did not think that SoulCycle was a good idea.
Oh, thanks. Right off the bat. Good start.
Let's just get it out, okay? So when I first decided I wanted to start an indoor cycling company, Spencer said, that is not a good idea, and it's so embarrassing how much you talk about spinning with my friends. So if we go out to dinner tonight, can you make sure that you don't bring up that spinning thing again? And then Elizabeth and I started SoulCycle in 2006, and Spencer was a creative director and a partner at a great marketing company. And the truth was that at the time, I mean, somebody really needed to pay our rent. I had given up my job in the entertainment business. I was making a good living and, you know, climbing my way up the ladder. And Spencer sort of took one for the team, and he took this job at a marketing agency, and he was working crazy hours, and he was getting pretty successful at it. And so he decided that he would stay put, and I truthfully couldn't afford to hire him. I mean, we couldn't afford to both be entrepreneurs at the time. So I went to work at SoulCycle, and Spencer gutted it out in the corporate world. And about 4.5, 5 years into the business, obviously the business was doing well, and we were starting to scale. And I had been doing the marketing, really, literally going door to door, depending on the kindness of strangers, doing whatever I could do, sort of being an amateur marketer. And Spencer's company fortuitously had a sale and a transaction at that time, and so we were in a little bit of a better position. And I said to Elizabeth, my co-founder, you know, what do you think about if Spencer, you know, does a little marketing here? And she said, well, I've been wanting Spencer to come and work here for a long time. And so what we did was, even though marketing reported to me, we brought Spencer in as a consultant to work on a project, and he reported to Elizabeth, because I didn't want to be the founder that brought my husband to work. And after, about 3 or 4 months, Elizabeth came into my office and said, you know, people here like working for Spencer better than they like working for us. Do you think that we can hire him now? And that is how Spencer got hired at SoulCycle, and really was probably the most valuable part as we scaled our business. He really helped us grow from, how many studios did we have when you came to work?
There were 18 when I joined.
Yeah, so from 18 to 65, and that was really when we needed sort of much more strategic marketing. In the beginning, it wasn't easy, but you know, we would go neighborhood by neighborhood, and realistically our business model showed that if we had about 400 people in a neighborhood, with the density of most of the cities that we put our studios in, you really could handle that pretty much in a grassroots way. That's what you needed to make one studio really work. But once we started to have 20 and 30 studios, they began to cannibalize each other. They began to, you know, be in locations where we no longer were, and that's when Spencer really came and helped us grow the business.
I'll say this, it's very interesting having the same boss at home as you have at work. It is challenging, but it's also a beautiful thing. And one thing about Julie and I is that we have very much invested in our relationship, in working on our marriage, in being strong together, in being good parents and good role models. And we have a very fun and loving and funny relationship. Julie's definitely the boss. I report to her for sure. And in the workplace, it plays very well. Our offices were diagonal across the kind of main area, so we had each of our teams sitting in between us, and there were marital disputes that took place, literally screaming over both of our teams. And it just helped, I think, build the feeling of SoulCycle as a family, values-driven business, where two of the leaders could be honest and vulnerable and parents, while at the same time really trying to be dynamic leaders of a very quickly growing organization.
I want to get to the dynamic and the coaching and some of the values that you're going to share. Can we go backwards just a little bit? Because that actually where I think some of the most interesting lessons are.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff I've read about is how the environment that you purposely created at home. And but I want to go backwards first.
Sure.
Before we get into SoulCycle. Where did each of you grow up, and what did your parents do for work? Go ahead, you go first.
Sure. I grew up in a small town outside of Baltimore, Maryland, and my mother stayed at home. She raised me and my younger sister. She's a terrific woman. My parents were divorced when I was about 10 years old, which was very challenging, but I think also at the end very good for me. And my father worked in a family business that my grandfather started. It was the first automated car wash in Baltimore. And he started, he was a World War II veteran. He read about car washes in Life magazine and decided to open one. And he turned it into a chain of about 9 car washes. My father went into that business, and that's what he did. He sold it about 3 years ago.
Okay. And what about you, Julie? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up outside of New York City in Westchester County in a pretty, regular middle-class suburb. My dad was a phys ed teacher. My mom ran an antique business. She was a teacher, and when she had my brother and I, she stopped working for a while, and then eventually she wound up running a village tag sale that turned into her collecting too much stuff, that turned into her learning about the stuff so that she could sell it, which turned into multiple art history degrees, and now she's sort of an expert at everything that is on everybody's shelf.
And I read that you were a good kid, stayed, really, really obedient, good student, didn't break too many rules. But can you share your first lawsuit and how you came upon being a plaintiff at the young age of 15, 16?
No, I was 12.
12, okay.
I was 12. So I actually was a very good kid. I was a rule follower. I'm still a rule follower. And as I'm sure that my own children are. So the only thing that I really wanted when I was 11 years old was I wanted to get a double piercing in my ear. And so I had one very rebellious friend. Her name was Laura Callio. And she convinced me that we should take a bus and go to the mall in White Plains and just get double piercings in my ear, actually not hers, because my mom actually wouldn't be that mad if I did it, even though she said no. So we got on the bus and I took my money and we did go, and I went and got a double piercing. And I came home, and because I was sort of, the nerdiest best kid, I couldn't even hide it for 5 minutes. I mean, I literally walked in the door and said, "Fine, I got my ear pierced, now what?" And my mom said, "Well, first thing I'm doing is I'm calling the jewelry store and telling them, they can't be putting holes in minors' bodies. I mean, it's a surgery, technically." And so my mom called the jewelry store and told them that she was very upset that in sort of a local neighborhood establishment, they would think it was okay to pierce a child's ear without permission. Now remember, this was 1980 something. And so the woman said, "You know what, if you don't like it, you should go ahead and sue me." And so my mom did. And my mother, very Elwood style, went to the library and was her own attorney and looked it up in all the law books. And she sued her for $9.85, which was how much my ear piercing cost at the time. And I had to be the plaintiff. So I got up there, and that was my punishment. I had to go to court and get up on the stand at local court in Scarsdale, New York, and tell them what I had done, which you can imagine is terrifying for a 12-year-old. And I did. I got up there, and I told them what happened, and we won our $9.80, and I'm sure that woman never pierced a minor's ear again, and you can be sure that I actually never did anything to disobey my parents again.
It's a brilliant lesson in so many ways.
So many.
Oh, it's so good. You're in for a good time over there, guys. Okay, so early career. Talk about what you did sort of out of school and before SoulCycle.
Sure. So I did undergrad at Harvard. I was a history major, and as I was graduating, almost 99% of my friends were going to be investment bankers in New York, and I just knew that wasn't for me. I was more of a storyteller, more of a creative person, and I had this vision that I wanted to move to Los Angeles and work in the entertainment business, but I really didn't know a soul out here. But it didn't stop me. I had two friends who had internships in LA, summer internships. They were a year younger than me, but they didn't have a car to get to LA, and I had a car. So I said, I'm just going to go out there and see what happens. And I moved to LA, and I got a job waiting tables at a place in Westwood called Monty's.
After Harvard?
Immediately after Harvard. In fact, the owner of the restaurant used to walk around behind me, and he'd throw his arm around my neck. He goes, "This is my Harvard waiter. This is my Harvard waiter." And it was amazing. I did it for like 6 months, and when you're a young person coming out of college, it was a steak and seafood house. The tickets were pretty high, and I was walking home with what felt like at the time a lot of cash. My underwear drawer was just filled with cash. And my parents were like, "When are you going to get a real job?" I'm like, "I'm doing pretty well. Like, don't give me such a hard time." Anyway, it was a different time then. We didn't have the tools for networking that you guys have at your disposal. And so for me, I had a yellow legal pad, and I would literally stop people on the street. I would be at a restaurant, I'd be at a bar, I'd kick up a conversation, and say, "Do you know anyone who works in the entertainment business?" And slowly but surely, after about 6 months, I probably had 40 names on the list, and I didn't know any better. So from the heads of studios, I got a guy named Mark Platt, who ran at the time TriStar Studios, which was a big studio.
La La Land, Wicked.
Wicked, exactly. And I called Mark Platt's office every day and would say, "I'm just calling because I called yesterday and I haven't heard from Mark. I'm just want to make sure he got my message." And the assistant would be like, "Why are you calling every day?" And I just didn't know better. And so eventually I landed a job. I landed an interview at the William Morris Agency, which was kind of the prestigious way in. And I got a job in the mailroom after about a year of pounding the pavement. And I started in the mailroom, and I worked my way up and became an agent for actors in the motion picture division.
And William Morris is the predecessor to WME, if you don't
Yeah.
know those initials
Exactly.
now. You're the second person who's told me they've called someone every day for months, and it actually worked out. So it's a lesson there. And what about you, early career before SoulCycle?
I also worked in the entertainment business. I graduated from school. Was always really passionate about theater, and I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do in the entertainment business. It wasn't really a prevalent job coming from a suburb of New York, and so I started out, I did internships, I worked for free, Xeroxing scripts all day, and eventually I got a job as an agent, and then as a manager I moved out here, and I worked for almost 20 years in the entertainment business representing actors.
And what did you learn from that experience that, and I won't say how it translated, but you've talked about being a good people picker.
Yes.
You worked with a guy named Benny Medina, Handprint Entertainment, and Benny represented everyone from Will Smith to Puffy to J-Lo when she was really sort of before she was J-Lo the brand. What did you learn from that experience?
Definitely. I do think that one of my good skills is I am a good people picker. And I
Take that as a compliment.
Yeah. I'm good at seeing people's potential, and sometimes better than they are, and I'm good at helping them realize their potential, and I think that really helped me both in the movie business and in SoulCycle, first with actors and then with instructors, to be honest with you. But it was interesting, when I worked at a company called Handprint Entertainment with Benny Medina, who is arguably one of the all-time great managers. He had everybody from Will Smith to Jennifer Lopez, and he's interesting because he is a guy who very early on, before actors were more than just people who auditioned for parts, they were just, there was a script and you'd fit an actor into a part that was created. Benny was actually thinking about people as brands. How can I create an album? How can I create a movie? How can I create a fragrance? How can I create a clothing line? How can I create a company? And this was, again, 20 years ago, which was really before people were thinking about people as companies and brands. And so from him, I really learned a lot about brand voice, about what would a person stand for? What did we want that person's association with the world to be? What were the 3 adjectives you would use to describe them? What would that look like? And I really watched him build people into brands, and it got me really beginning to think about, what does a brand look like? What does a brand feel like? What does a brand sound like? All of those things began to really, fall into place for me.
And we all talk about that word all the time. What is a brand to you? You're a brand manager. Don't get into all the strategies and tactics. We'll get into that. But what is a brand?
A brand, I think it is it's an expression of how people feel about something. It has to do with emotional response that you get from an experience, a service, a product. That's the essence of what a brand is. It's just how something makes you feel.
Excellent definition. I agree. Okay, so you guys are living in LA. You met in LA, right?
That's right.
And you decide that you want to move back east and sort of have a change in life and change in shift, and you make a deal to quit your jobs. How did that go for each of you?
Oh, that's a good story. So we both wanted to live at the beach, really, and we kind of had said, like, I think we're going to make this change, and we were, I'd say, not satisfied in our jobs. They were very valuable, and I think we learned a lot in those jobs, but I think we just felt like it was time for a change. And so we said, why don't we take a 1-year lease on a place on the beach in Malibu, and at the end of that year, when the lease expires, we will go in and quit our jobs on the same day, like champions, And we had no idea what we were going to do. It was just kind of the mentality of, like, jump and hope.
This is not something that we recommend to the studio
don't
audience.
do this. Don't do this.
It is better for at least one person to keep their job.
Yeah. Well, so funny enough, she should mention that. So year wraps up. We had this glorious year falling in love right on the beach in Malibu. It was really fantastic. And we went in to quit on the same day. And I went in and I said, I resign, and my company was kind of like, all right, don't let the door hit you on the way out. And I came home, and I was so excited. Julie came home, and I was like, well, how did it go? And she's like, it's great. They told me they'd open a satellite office for me in New York City. I was like, that's not the plan. The plan was for us to both be out of work and, like, hanging out. But it ended up kind of paving the way for us to be able to relocate to New York, to be able to live in New York City. I don't know what I was thinking, both of us quitting our jobs and moving to the most expensive place on the planet. And it worked out. It ended up working out really well.
We're going to talk about the startup of SoulCycle, but whenever you're starting a company, you got to have a way to feed yourself. If you're a team, it makes sense to play a zone, and one person has a job or has some income. Or you have savings that you can burn, for 6 months or a year, whatever your runway is. So always you have to think about, is money coming in the household? So let's talk about the origin of SoulCycle. How did you meet Elizabeth, and what was the idea that both of you came up with, and how did it sort of ferment into something more?
Yeah, so it is the beginning of 2006. Spencer and I had been living in New York now for about a year, and I had been running the New York office of my Los Angeles company. And the one thing, even though we were really happy to be back on the East Coast, the one thing that I really missed about Los Angeles, and back then, 17, 18 years ago, was exercise as lifestyle. When I lived here in LA, and I'm sure you can all relate to this, a lot of my recreation, my social life was, I'd go hiking with a friend, I'd go running with a friend, I've actually belonged to a running group. So much of the time that I spent on me and my social relationships and my community were doing outdoor physical things. And when I got to New York, there were only big box gyms. There were actually no exercise studios at all. There was no boutique fitness in New York. And I missed that whole exercise as fun, exercise as social life vibe. In New York, it was all about boot camp, competing with your neighbor, paying your monthly membership, getting it done. It was sort of like dry cleaner, pick up your dry cleaning, go to work out. It was just part of the grind. And so for me, I'm not a big partier, I'm really not a drinker, so it was really a part of my life in a way that filled a lot of my social needs. And I started to think, it's crazy. There could be, a small indoor cycling studio. I had done some indoor cycling in LA. I really enjoyed it. I loved the music. I loved sort of the stress release of it. And I began to think of it sort of as a production. How could you produce these classes? How could you create some sort of a brand and some sort of a mini production so that people could really experience an emotional arc, a musical arc, a physical arc, and you could create something that would bring people together and begin to create some sort of a social life around exercise. Really, the mission statement and the idea was just exercise as joy, exercise as fun. And I became friendly with a cycling teacher at the big box gym that I belonged to, and I just kept saying to her, this could be better, this could be different, this could be curtain up, curtain down. And one day she came to me and she said, there's a woman that takes a class of mine that I teach at a different gym, and she's been saying that she wants to invest in an exercise business. You two should meet. And so Elizabeth and I had lunch one day in early 2006, and it was one of those crazy moments. We always describe it as the best blind date that we had ever been on.
Try not to be offended by that, but it's hard.
And it was crazy. We met and we are so different. People always assume that we must have been best girlfriends in college because, there could possibly be two women that just wanted to get together and make money. We must have been friends in a different life. But we really weren't. We were strangers. We met at a lunch. We had the same vision. Elizabeth thought it could be, really beautifully designed, that we could use things like Apple or luxury goods as our muse for what this place would look like. Rather than a dark, sweaty gym, we would make it look white like an art gallery. In fact, our muses were Apple and the White Cube in London. Those were sort of our Pinterest board, heroes. And we just began talking, and it was crazy. I got in my cab after lunch that day, and before I could even pull the door closed, my cell phone rang, and it was Elizabeth, and she said, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to look for real estate, and you're going to research towels, and I'm going to call you on Thursday. And I went back to my desk, and I Googled towels. And it turns out that you rent them if you have no laundry machines, so I got some numbers to rent our towels. And sure enough, she called me Thursday and told me to meet her across the street. She had found a 1,200 square foot dance studio that we could sublet, we could rent it. She found it on Craigslist. And I went across the street and met her. And we went to Starbucks after that, and we wrote on the back of a napkin our business plan. If we could see 75 people a day at $27 a person, we could make enough money to keep the lights on, to pay our employees, and we would each have enough left over to help pay some babysitters to watch our small children. And 4 months later, we opened. And that was about how we opened SoulCycle.
Own money. Didn't have investors.
No investors, $250,000. We built it all out of IKEA kitchen cabinetry. We rented the bikes because we couldn't afford to buy them. We actually didn't have washing machines. We didn't have showers. We would send the laundry out every night. It would come back hopefully early enough in the morning for the classes. Otherwise, I would have to ration the towels till the laundry guy delivered them back again. And that's the way it went. Elizabeth had made an investment in a friend of hers started that natural beverage company, Izzy. She put $25,000 in when he needed some cash. She got $250,000 back on her $25,000, and that was our seed money for SoulCycle.
Elizabeth, the investor, she came from Denver, I think, was her upbringing, right?
She grew up in. She went to University of Boulder, and she lived in Telluride for a long time.
That's right. So we've talked about this in class before about not having money, not having investors, and the advantages of that. If you've got money, you spend your way out. If you don't have money, you have to think your way out. You also had some freedom, right?
We had a lot of freedom. The amazing thing for us was that we were always able to make the right choices for the business. We never had to make choices just because we wanted to make money quickly or we needed to report on our earnings to our investors. We always were able to make the choices that we thought were going to be the best for the business in the long run. And that included saying no to a lot of things, right? Early on, we experienced success pretty quickly just in terms of the number of people that we were seeing every day and the type of people that we were seeing every day, people that were willing to spend money on things like juices and protein bars. And so all of those companies came out of the woodwork really early on to see if we wanted to do collaborations, if they could sell things in our studios. And at the time, truth be told, we really needed the money. We were living in a rent-controlled apartment. We were, Spencer and I, Spencer would take a couple $100 of cash out of the cash machine on Sunday nights. He would put $200 in an envelope for me and $200 in an envelope for him. And he would say, here's your money for the week. I'll see you next Sunday, and that's what we did.
That was it. And we did that for almost 2 years.
We cut up our credit cards. And so really, I'm only saying that to say that at the time when all of these offers were coming in, and we were turning them down to use SoulCycle's lobby as a pickup spot for juice cleanses, which they would have paid us $10,000 a month, or all these things. We said no because we really knew that in order to build a brand, a real brand, a brand that meant something and that people felt attached only to the feelings that we wanted them to, that we couldn't begin to put other names on the marquee, that there could really only be one star in the SoulCycle show, and that had to be SoulCycle. And so without investors and with the willingness to be scrappy and live lean, we were able really to make the right choices for the business.
How many of you have taken a SoulCycle class? Hands. Ooh, nice. So describe what the SoulCycle vision and experience was. We talk about this brand that you're building, but what is the experience that makes it so different? And again, tough for them because they're 18. Most of them are 18 to 25ish, and the landscape. They only know this landscape. There weren't boutique places. There were places like any gym that you belong to where you pay $50, $80, $150 a month, and you just go in when you want and don't go when you want. This model didn't exist. So let's talk about what you were trying to create and what that experience was supposed to feel like.
So realistically, yes. So you have to picture it's 2006. There's Equinox, there is Crunch, there are a couple of other, New York Sports Club type of places in New York City. And the model for fitness at this time really is membership, right? So take your credit card imprint, charge you every month, make it impossible for you to get out of your gym membership, and also hope that you do not show up. Because if you don't show up, I can, sell 3 spots for your 1 spot. I can max out my utilization and continue to charge your credit card until after you're just so frustrated and can't figure out how to cancel it, you'll still pay for an extra year or so. I mean, that's really what the landscape of gym membership looked like. And we sort of had a vision, and people thought we were crazy, that we could create a pay-per-class experience which would actually challenge us every single time to deliver on what we said we were going to. In gyms, the truth is, group fitness is a profit loss for them. There's membership and there's personal training, and that is the way that gyms make money. And so group fitness is an afterthought. It's something that you put on the menu because it needs to be included in the membership, but it's really not what they do for a living. And so we had a vision that really if we could create something, and for us the pillars and what we saw was really missing in the market were a couple of major things. The first thing that was broken was the actual industry for the talent. And we always thought of our instructors as talent. Coming from the movie business, I really began to think of these people as artists. And when we began to train them, we trained them with 3 things in mind to sort of create the experience that we were looking for. If you become a SoulCycle instructor, you train for about 8 weeks. It's a full-time training commitment. And you learn 3 things. You learn the physical, you learn the spiritual, and you learn the musical. And then when you're done learning each of those 3 pillars, you put them together in a way that creates an emotional arc, a physical arc, and a musical arc. And it's really, when you're done, it is like a theater production, which is exactly what we thought we would do. And so these instructors we were looking for were all, at the time, fitness professionals. There was no full-time job for them. So they would teach 1 class in 1 gym and 1 class in another gym and personal train 2 people. There was no health insurance. There was no paid vacation. So people were like ruining their bodies. They were burnt out. They couldn't focus on any of the things that they were doing because when they were not teaching, they were spending all their time on a subway. So what we did is we paid above market rate. We gave them health insurance. We paid for vacation time, but what we expected from them was for them to be brand ambassadors, to come early, to meet the people that were going to be riding, to send them their favorite songs afterward, to learn their names, to know where they like to sit, to understand if their fitness was getting better. And the crazy thing is that people felt seen. They felt like they mattered. Our front desk, we also noticed that hospitality was missing from the fitness industry. People were not people. They were just, people barely looked up. They checked your membership card, it beeped, you walked in. First at SoulCycle, the experience started at the door. We began to think about it, as a culture of yes. How could we make you happy? How could we do something above and beyond what you expected? If you didn't show up for a couple weeks, could we call you and ask if you were okay? If you went someplace on a vacation that was in a high altitude, when you came back, would a front desk person ask if your cardio level was better after being on a bike? How did it feel in the mountains, right? The next thing we did was, believe it or not, enable technology. At the time, if you went to a spin class at a gym, you had to go an hour early to sign up for your bike on a paper sheet. I know it doesn't seem innovative. The SoulCycle app and us creating online signups was a revolutionary thing. At the time, you were signing up on paper. In 2006, there was no Instagram, there was no Snapchat, and there were no online reservations. And that was really another sort of innovative thing for us. And then design. Nobody thought about fitness as an elevated, beautiful, branded experience, and we really thought about that as well. So when we thought about creating a marketplace, we thought about a pay per class experience, and we thought, how do you throw all these elements in to ultimately make a brand? And we thought, heck, we're going to go for it. We're going to charge $27 a class and see who comes back. And everyone thought we were crazy. Everyone thought it was the worst idea. We didn't have showers, and we did it. And I remember the first time that the New York Times came to write about SoulCycle, and I was so excited. I mean, somebody came, they took the class, the article was going to run a week later, and I said to Spencer, you're going to have to watch Phoebe this morning. I got to open the studio at 4 in the morning. I'm sure the phones are going to be ringing off the hook. The Times is coming out today. And I went to the studio. It was 5 in the morning. It was pitch black. I keyed into the studio, and I sat there, and nobody called. And then when people did start to call, it wasn't about, why should I come? Can I sign up? The question was, why would I pay $27 for a product that is already included in my gym membership? And that was sort of the setup for the next 3 years of being in business. Not explaining to people why our product was the very best, but really creating a marketplace for us to put our own product back into. And so it's really interesting because, I'm sure for any of you that are thinking about being entrepreneurs, it's sort of that duality of innovating and creating new categories, but then figuring out a way to create a category to put your own product into, which is really tricky. It's a really tricky thing to do. I think ultimately, you will create what the consumer needs, and obviously delivering on a great product will be the best marketing that you can have.
But sometimes the consumer doesn't really know what she or he wants, as Steve Jobs used to say, because they haven't seen it. We're used to a lower level of service in the gym and just sort of running in and out and not having anything like this. It didn't make sense. So when you were not a believer early on, enough of your spinning class, when did you sort of see this starting to take traction where you said, talk to me more about the spinning class?
Oh, yeah. Well, I didn't go to SoulCycle for about 7 months or so, and one time Julie came home, and it was one of these New York August boiling hot days, and not to paint a picture, but I was about 25 pounds heavier than I am right now, and I was sitting on my sofa in my underwear, kind of watching, I think, The Simpsons, and Julie walked in and just got a look at me and was like, I've got a spinning studio literally 300 yards from our apartment. You got to give it a try at some point. And I did, and I went. And the first time I went in, I'm a music guy, like you, and that's what got me. And the first time I went, I was like, this is an experience that I'm surprised to say I really enjoy this, because again, I'd heard Julie talking about spinning forever, and it would make me crazy. And finally, I got it. And it took about, I'd say, a year. And I remember I called a buddy of mine who lived in Los Angeles, still in the entertainment business. And he's like, what's going on with your wife's fitness business? And I said, I got to say something to you. I'm not sure what's happening, but something is happening, and it's magical. And you really have to keep an eye on it, because you can feel these people walking out of the room changed from the time they came in. And it felt like it was the best part of their day. It felt like it was what they wanted to talk about. And again, I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew very quickly something very special was happening.
And what is it that happens in there, Julie, in that experience that makes people transform? And is there a magic number? Because I always say, It's not the first time necessarily that you're hooked. Maybe the second or third, when all of a sudden it goes from like, I got to go to spin class with or I got to go to SoulCycle with my friend, to I'm going, whether you're going or not. What is it that happens in there to people, and why is it so sort of essential to what humans need?
Yeah. Well, our CMO figured out that it actually takes between 3 and 4 times for somebody to get hooked.
Analytics.
Yeah.
And I, when I set people up on the bikes, I always say to them, the first time it's like skiing. The equipment is really bulky and hard to understand how to clip your feet in and clip your feet out, and your back's going to hurt because you're too close into the handlebars, and you're not in your core. And and the second time, you'll get it a little bit more. But I always do say to people, even the first time that they come, you're not going to be able to get your feet in, you're not going to be able to get your feet out, the instructor's going to go up, she's going to go down, you're not going to be able to do any of that stuff, she's going to tell you to turn the resistance up, you're going to feel like you want to die. But there's going to be about 15 seconds where a piece of music comes on that you love, and the entire room is moving on the same foot, and you actually catch the music, and the person on your left and the person on your right are going on the same feet with you, and the instructor says something that touches you in a way that you did not know that you were open to being spoken to that day, something that not even your closest friends are going to say to you. And in that 15 seconds, you will be touched in a way between the music and the words and the community and the tribal feeling of it and the empowerment in your own body that you didn't even know you could be that strong or move in that way. And those 15 seconds will be enough. They'll be enough to get you back the next time, because feeling that way, there's something really, we all talk about mind, body, and what happens when you connect those two things. But in those very rare moments where we are able to get out of our own way and get really clear and be in our body and present to other people around us, but also really present to our own self, there's just no feeling like that. And it only takes a second. It's like eating 2 bites of cake that's so good you'll go back for it again, And I always say it just doesn't matter. If you can catch that beat for 10 seconds with the people on your right and your left, you're going back. You're going back because there's just nothing else that feels like that.
You think about when you have your best ideas, it's probably doing something,
Always.
exercising, when you're breathing and sort of, all the things we talk about, whether it's mindfulness and meditation, cycling, swimming, running, puts you into that state. Mm-hmm. And to do it with a group, I think, and to sort of get all the messaging that you impart during that, it's such a unique experience. Mm-hmm. You're responsible for brand execution. How many locations did they have when you came on board?
I think there were 18 or 19.
And was it the vision already in place, the brand already in place, and you were executing, or were you helping to develop the brand as well? And what does a CMO do for people that want to be in marketing?
Well, I'll start just by saying that the vision and values of the company were really a reflection of Julie's and Elizabeth's vision and values. And I know Julie very well, and I felt like the brand was largely baked when I came in. They had a mission, they had pillars, they had values, they had kind of, this is a yes, this is a no, and it was very specific. And I think one of my gifts is the ability to kind of like squeeze what is in Julie and Elizabeth's head onto paper, and to take the expression of the brand and what it's meant to be, and to put that into the proper channels and send it out towards the people that we're trying to bring into the studio. A CMO, the role of a CMO has changed dramatically over the last 5-10 years since technology has really taken off. There have been whole new layers of organizations brought into a CMO's wheelhouse, and it's really challenging, which is why the turnover rate for CMOs is so intense. But to me, CMOs are storytellers. They're responsible for understanding the essence of the brand, being able to tell its story in an effective way across all channels. They're responsible for building the community, for acquiring customers, for retaining customers, and then for ideally increasing the frequency of the customers that are coming to your business. So it's kind of a combination of brand, creative, business, and growth. And it's a real challenging job, because you really have to have your fingers in all pieces of the puzzle.
And when you're looking at, the great thing about your signups being digital, again, things that people assume now, is that you have a view into habits and attendance and usage and recurring returns and churn. When you looked at those versus what's a healthy company, and there aren't a ton of comps for you at that point in time, did you see that, your customer acquisition rate and your churn rate was low? I mean, when did you sort of see like, wow, the data that's coming from this is very strong? So that community part, was that how you built the community, or did the community sort of backdoor into that? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Which came first, and how did you amplify that?
I think there's two things. First of all, because we're a retail business with people on the ground, Julie and Elizabeth did an incredible job, and their first employee, who ultimately became the head of culture, trained every single one of the first 1,500 employees that came through the door personally. And it was almost like SoulCycle University. You came in and you were trained not just to run the front desk, but to listen. I think it's really important, and it kind of ties into the service element of this business. So all the data that you can study from the back end of customer management system will tell you something, but you're never going to get better information or intel than what you hear on the ground, particularly when you train your people to listen. And so many of the insights that I got and that ultimately drove campaigns or different initiatives that we ran, different partnerships, was based on what we were hearing. I would go into the studio and I'd say, like, what are people saying? Where are they going for vacation? What are they complaining about? And they knew. You would always get responses. And once you hear something a couple of times, the wheels start turning, and you're able to come up with an idea. For example, like, we started hearing in Los Angeles that the front desk staff were complaining that the studio in a couple of weeks was going to be dead because all of their riders were going to the Sundance Film Festival. It's a big, heavy entertainment market here, early days of SoulCycle. And we thought to ourselves, all right, well, this is an interesting place. Maybe we should go out there and kind of be a venue, a destination for our riders at Sundance. So we very quickly whipped together a pop-up experience, built a full studio just basically from scratch that really looked and smelled like SoulCycle. And it was just a place where our riders came in and were like, I can't even believe you put this place together. Like, it's exactly what we needed. We ended up kind of owning the morning at the Sundance Film Festival, which was something that no brand had really ever done. And it served as the basis for a pop-up experience that we brought around the country afterwards to different festivals and conferences and things like that. And it all just came from an insight of on the ground. And then on the data front, we also used that to inform some of our ideas. Like one example is we looked at riders and we saw there was a kind of a distinction between riders who were coming, less than 10, 11 times a month, but then there was kind of your super riders. And so we felt like we needed to create a campaign to get people up to that level. And so we created a challenge, which Julie wasn't super psyched about. We thought challenges were like gym products. But it ended up being one of our most successful campaigns. It was called Turn It Up 20, and it still exists to this day.
20 visits in a month?
20 rides in a month, yeah. Very simple.
Well, I want the students to have some questions in a minute, so I want to cover a timeline, and then I want to talk about relationships and coaching, because you've really sort of emphasized that. The company started in 2006 in New York. 2008, there's a recession. Your partner's husband works for Lehman Brothers, did work for Lehman Brothers, no longer in 2008. In 2011, that's when Equinox purchased a majority share, I think?
Correct.
In 2011. And in 2016, did you leave the board in 2016? Or?
In 2016, we sold the rest of our stake.
And remained on the board? And
we remained on the board for another 18 months.
Okay. At the time that you left the board, how many locations, how many employees?
What do we have, about 2,200 employees, 80 locations.
Jeez, that's not, anytime you see an overnight success, there's usually 10 years behind it. So it's 10 years at least, but it still is a pretty meteoric rise for a brand and an experience that you don't see very often.
Well, also, I will say the one question that people always used to ask us, investors especially, were, it's great. It's the the New York studios are fantastic. You know, after the first one, they would say, oh, it's fantastic. But, you know, you're in the studio every day, so what happens if you're not there? And then we'd have 5, and they would say, yeah, but you can still touch everybody. And the real question was, how do you scale a human experience? How do you really train and touch people in a way that they are able to touch other people? And so for us, it's really a big achievement to have created something, you know, an IRL product that is scaled like that.
I want to talk about coaching because your partner, Elizabeth, Googled life coach and found a coach, and you were not open to that initially. You didn't think that was sort of the best. You're a New Yorker at heart probably, and didn't think that was a great idea.
We had a lot of work to do that day. So no, it's really interesting, right? Because we start this business, obviously, we sublet a dance studio. We thought, great, we'll see 7,500 people a day. This is going to be a great business. Maybe if it goes really well, we'll open another one or two of these. And there we are, you know, 1 year later, this thing is cash flowing. It's completely obvious to us that we need to step on the gas and really begin to run because it's working. And Elizabeth had 2 small children at home. I had just Phoebe at the time. And she begins to panic because Elizabeth was never even going to come to work full time. We had a third partner. It didn't work out pretty early on. I was going to be the sweat equity and do all the PR and the marketing and the people and the brand and the retail and all that stuff. And Elizabeth was going to set up the business and get us going. And then we had a third partner that was going to handle the fitness. And that didn't work out pretty quickly. And so we had to, it was a sort of a twofold thing. That didn't work out at the same time that the business started to get successful really quickly. And so Elizabeth had to come to work every day, all day. And we both found ourselves working, you know, crazy amount, which was what we needed to do. And Elizabeth sort of had a mini breakdown and said, I'm not sure, I'm not home, I'm never, you know, and so she Googled Life Coach NYC so that we could go talk about the fact that I wanted to scale this business quickly and she wasn't sure. She wanted to maybe stay at home sometimes. And we found a business coach. And it was really interesting because Elizabeth and I, our partnership is actually really one of the greatest parts of what happened at SoulCycle. We are 2 completely different people with completely different skill sets, which I would say if anybody is starting a company or looking for a business partner, although sometimes it's a lot more fun to, you know, be with somebody who's exactly like you and likes everything that you like, I will say that one of the things that really helped us grow our business was, you know, there were certain things. You know, we would be running out of money. We would make a $50,000 mistake, and I would just think we've got to shut it down. I mean, we've got nothing left in the bank. You know, they're delivering toilet paper, and we can't pay our credit card bill. And Elizabeth was great. Elizabeth is a great gambler. She's got a stomach made of steel. She's an awesome investor, and those were things that just like Elizabeth's a baller. She's a total risk taker. She's a real entrepreneur, you know, and she just keeps going. When it comes to people, she can't handle it. You know, people's needs, wants, complaints, that's not for her. You know, I can handle anybody like that. You know, I'm a great people person. And so it's really interesting. We really had a great partnership in that way. And yet we were 2 people that had 2 different lives. And just like a marriage, we realized pretty early on that in order to be good partners, we needed to really have a place to talk about, you know, I want to sell the company. You don't want to. I want to grow quickly to 10 more studios across the country. You want to pick your kids up from school. You know, how's that going to work out for everybody? And so we found a business coach and we began to work with her. And the amazing thing about it was we quickly found ourselves with 500 employees and then 1,000 employees. And we didn't sign up to be CEOs of thousands of employees. We signed up to have 100 bikes in a room. And so we learned how to run a business with her help. And as we learned lessons like how to communicate, how to empty your bucket, how to not leave at night angry at a colleague, how to write an email, how to treat somebody else, we began to take those lessons that we were learning with each other and we fed them to our organization. So we all grew together. We had an incredible chief culture officer, and we would learn things with our coach Meredith. and then we would tell Amy about them, and she would codify them and turn them into lessons, and we would teach them to the entire organization. And as a result of it, we really all grew up to be leaders together. And that greatly affected the DNA of the company. And I think as we gave people these tools, they felt empowered, and our customers felt that. Our customers felt the fact that we were able to communicate with each other, so we were able to communicate with them. There was a real ability to be transparent because we learned how to talk to each other. And that was a lot of work. And it is a lot of work to do that. It's a lot easier to just keep going with your day job. But I think that if you want to create a company where there is real culture, which ultimately, Simon Sinek, who's a big favorite of ours at SoulCycle and a big favorite of mine, he always says, happiest customer is only as happy as happiest employee. And so we really spent a lot of time working on our relationship and in turn working on the culture at the company.
I want to give them a specific tool that I read about that you would help learn through your coach, and that is how to be a good listener. And I want both of you to share why that's not just important, but how to do it. You had some techniques of asking another question and asking another question, well, tell me more. And share that, because that's something that works in business and in life.
Yes. So it's interesting. Elizabeth and I are actually working on an entire sort of new concept around this now. We're really looking at the emotional and relational space and trying to think about what does it look like to have, fitness for your relationships, learning how to have conversations with people in a different way. And we all talk a lot, and most often it's two people having monologues rather than two people in a dialogue. And the way that we learn to communicate with each other, actually, with a sort of marriage therapist, was, is now a good time to have a conversation with you? And if it is, I get to say, today, when we were at Warner Brothers Studio, I wanted a snack, and you said you weren't hungry, and we kept going on the tour, and I was really thirsty and hungry. And he doesn't get to say, well, we're going to miss all the people on the tour. What he gets to say is, so what I'm hearing you say.
So what I'm hearing you say is when we were on the tour at Warner Brothers today, you were hungry and you wanted a snack, but I said that we had to keep on moving. Is there more?
There is more. It's not.
Are we having a session right now? This is incredible.
Yes, let's show them what it's.
This is great.
There is more. I was thirsty, and sometimes I feel like when I need something, you are not paying attention to my needs, and you're just keeping up with whatever your priority is, and that makes me feel like my needs aren't important to you.
We really are having a session right now. So what I'm hearing you say is, sometimes when you're thirsty, I am not paying attention to your needs. You have certain needs that aren't being met, and I just want to keep doing what I'm doing. Did I get that right?
Sort of, except what I also said.
We are really having a session right now.
What I also said is that makes me feel like my needs are not a priority to you.
Okay. So what I hear you say is you also feel like that makes you feel like your needs are not a priority to me right now.
That's
Did
right.
I get that right? Is there more?
There is one more thing. It reminds me of when I was a kid and my dad would just make us gut it out, and maybe somebody in my family wanted to stop or take a break or needed something, but in my family, it was really a value just to gut through things that you needed and just keep going.
So I'm hearing you say is when you were a kid, this situation reminded you of your dad, because he would always make you gut through situations and just keep on doing what he wanted to do and not take your feelings into consideration. Is that right?
Yes.
Is there more?
There's not.
And normally we give each other a big hug and hold each other for a minute and try and breathe.
Or
but
if you're
that's,
doing with
super
a colleague,
awkward in front of a group.
Or if you're doing with a colleague, you just say, "Thank you for sharing."
Yeah, thank you for sharing. You're welcome.
Thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you for listening. It took a long time and a lot of work, and it seems really annoying, but honestly, it's an incredible framework for expressing yourself and for teaching you to listen to what your partner needs. And it is so applicable not just to your marriage, but to your business, to having children, even to your friends, sometimes to your professors, maybe.
Look, if I had these tools, I would have been far more successful in my relationships. And truly, because it's usually not what the person is upset about. The surface thing is very rarely that. It's
Yeah.
always something behind
That's
that.
right.
And once you get to that, you really can sort of get closer after that. It's a really important relationship tool.
And let me just tie a bow on it by saying that everybody just wants to be seen and feel like somebody hears them and that they matter. And that was really, that's a core value in our marriage, but really applicable for this class. That was really our biggest core value at SoulCycle, was that everybody just wants to matter. An instructor calls out your name over a song and you think you're a hero because somebody knows that you're there. Somebody at the front desk remembers your shoe size and you feel like the chef just came to your table at a restaurant to offer you something special, right? Somebody remembers that you have a dog and, customer A has a dog and customer D has a dog, and you say, you guys should go to the dog park together. And people are like, wow, people really know me here. And that is really such a key, especially in business. People want to feel like they're known.
And seen and matter, and connectivity is everything in life. I want to finish with a quote from Julie, and I want you to explain the quote. It's a very simple one. And then we'll not finish. You guys are going to take over. Shoot, I sort of just lost it.
I'm sure it was brilliant.
No, I won't get it exactly. It's that Julie Rice says there's no elevator to success. You have to take the stairs. Why do you have to take the stairs?
Did you learn that about me today?
Yeah.
Well, obviously it's a fantastic metaphor, right? There's no easy way to to take a business and make it happen. And the truth is, I actually really think, to be a great entrepreneur, yes, you need a great idea, and yes, you need a little bit of luck, but mostly you really need to be able to just, every time you make a mistake, to get up and keep going. I think for me, I was lucky enough to have a great business partner, and like I said before, the things that were devastating to her were not devastating to me, and vice versa. So a lot of times we were able to just help get each other up. But I am also a claustrophobic. I do not take elevators at all. I have climbed, I think my highest climb was to the 71st floor of 30 Rock to the Rainbow Room for a wedding.
That was in full formal wear.
Yes, I was in hair and makeup and I had my heels in a bag. And in a post 9/11 New York, actually, it's not about physical fitness because I could climb hundreds of flights, but it is really about getting stair access. So I am often, brought in through the back of house, through kitchens, through different things, because there's only certain staircases that you're able to access in hotels, in office buildings, in museums, etc. But I do not take an elevator.
There you go. Fascinating. Questions from students?
Hi there, thank you so much for coming to USC today. We really appreciate it. So my question is that, because I hear that most successful entrepreneurs say that they are very attached to their business emotionally. And can you please share with us as much as you like about the moment that you sold the rest of your stake at SoulCycle? How did that feel like?
Absolutely. So let me just say that SoulCycle, was really a third child for me. And I do think that for anybody that has an idea and is wondering if they should actually spend their life pursuing it, I can only tell you that SoulCycle used to wake me up in the middle of the night. It was a passion. I dreamt about it. The brand voice is really my voice. It came out of my head and onto a wall, and I was attached to every word of it, every yellow thing that we made. Every instructor was like a child of mine. The way that I was attached to that business was really, it was my family, it was my creativity, and it was really everything for me. Now, we sold the business in a couple of different parts, and so I'll take you through it. The first part, when we sold the business in 2011, we sold majority stake. Now, Elizabeth and I would stay on and run the business as co-CEOs for another 6 years, and the reason that we really sold the first bite of it was because we had created a category, we had created a product, and we were running. And the truth is, we knew that what we had was special. We loved it so much that really we just wanted to win. We wanted to be first to market, and we took a strategic partner. We didn't just take a money partner. We had plenty of offers, and we could have taken the money from a lot of different places. But for us, nobody had ever scaled fitness before other really than Equinox, and we thought that they were best in class and that we would be able to go faster with them. And it was really for the love of the business. Again, we were profitable, we were building Peter, we were paying Paul with it, and then we were giving it to Mary. So we were able to build probably without taking money on, we probably could have built, three of them a year. We wanted to build 15 a year. So that was the first sale of the business. And it was great. I mean, we made some money. It was awesome. Like we were still living in our rent control apartment. We were able to buy an apartment. We were able to go on vacations. I was able to take taxis, not buses, and it was awesome. I mean, it was life-changing money, and it was great. So we ran the business, and everything was going really, really well. And we had a lot of autonomy. For 6 years, we ran the business. We were still able to make a lot of great choices for the business. We loved doing it. And then the business started to become, worth a couple $100 million. $500 million and $600 million, and as the business became more and more profitable, more and more people had opinions about how the business should be run and about, what it should look like. And Elizabeth and I just started to think that it was really time for us to begin to think about maybe, taking some more money on, adding some other new partners. We actually wanted to go deeper into technology. And it felt like we were either going to innovate in a way that was different at the time, or we were going to probably leave the business. And when we sold the second bite, it was really interesting, right? Because the amount of equity that we had left was so much less than when we sold it the first time, and yet we made so much more money. And it was awesome. I mean, we made a lot of money, and that was great. I'm only saying that to tell you that, as honestly, I think that your question is an awesome one, because I spent years mourning the sort of not being at the center of that business. I remember the day Elizabeth and I decided we were going to leave, I said to her, the only way I'm going to be able to walk out of here is if before we actually do that, if we rent an office somewhere, so that the day that we leave here, I know where we're going to go, and I know that we're going to sit at a table or two desks next to each other, and we're just going to either start again or just sit in an office and order lunch together every day, or whatever we're going to do. But it would be too hard for me to walk out of here without really having a physical place that I know I can go to tomorrow. And so we did. It's still hard. I mean, it's still hard to walk into a business that was your baby and see it look different, feel different, smell different. And I will say, when you create something like that, it is such a huge part of you that the money is great, but there's definitely like a real loss. It's a real mourning, and you just try to figure it out again.
I think we all still struggle with it, but I think Julie still struggles with it. There are days that are hard. I also think that the purpose of an entrepreneur, though, is to create, to give birth to a concept, to build that concept, and then to sell it. And the selling part is a really critical part of being an entrepreneur. And I think that it is almost impossible to take the emotion out of something that you've built. But that's what great entrepreneurs are able to do. And I think there are many more examples of entrepreneurs who hang on to things that then decrease in value than those who are able to sell. Because when people are sniffing around and ready to buy, more often than not, it's time to let go. And you learn that lesson from speaking to other entrepreneurs. And unfortunately, generally, you see businesses get sold, taken over by people who think they know better, and then the business is kind of, that is also it's a tale as old as time. And I hear more and more, the more entrepreneurs we speak to who have created and sold businesses.
I'll just say this. I mean, we made the right choice. That being said, the irony is we really didn't do it for the money, which is why it was so successful. We really loved it so much that it never was really about the money. If we hadn't gotten an investment, we would have just kept, funding it ourselves, and we would have kept it going, and it would have been awesome. And so ultimately, to give it away for this huge pile of money, it's a mixed thing when you love something so much and you don't really do it for the money. So, yeah.
Hi, thank you guys so much for sharing. My business partner and I are kind of in the same situation you guys were at in the beginning, where there was a market leader. In your case, it was Equinox. And we're having trouble kind of distinguishing ourselves from our market leader. And what was the process that you guys took to develop your brand to be different and better than your competitor?
I guess it's really understanding what your brand stands for that is different than the market leader. Sort of what is the differentiation that you feel makes it special or different or bringing something new to the consumer. And then after you identify what that is, how do you define it? And how do you define it in all of your senses? How do you define it in what it looks like? How do you define it in what a person feels like when they're there? How do you define it in, what it smells like, what it sounds like in terms of a brand voice? I think that the first step is really to sit down and define what the differentiation is, what it is that makes your offering special, and then to think about how you want to articulate that to the world.
I also think there were a lot of pain points that existed with the other product in the market. And if you can identify and figure out how your brand or product is going to overcome those pain points, that's always a good way to start. But that's very much the what of what you're doing. I think you can also, something that you can also look at is why does your business exist? The best businesses are able to explain why they exist. And if you can do that in a way that's more convincing, better response to consumer demand in a way that's different or needed, it'll help you kind of establish that the point of view that differentiates you from the leader.
Yeah, if you haven't read Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why, maybe you have. I feel like that gives you kind of a really good starting
That's
point.
a great book.
I was wondering what your thoughts are on the potential of adding memberships to SoulCycle, and if you think that would still clash with the brand, or if that could potentially be something that happens in the future.
So, well, I don't work there anymore, but I will say, look, I think that it's interesting, right? We created a pay-per-class product because we wanted to challenge ourselves every time. We wanted to make sure that every experience that you had was bulletproof, right? We used to say we're only as good as the last time somebody walked out the door. And so if people are paying per class, then we are challenging ourselves to create a consistent and great product every single time. That being said, so for me, it would sort of go against the why we created the company. That being said, I also think a decade and change later, the landscape has changed. Membership has become very much in vogue again. And I think that, people think about membership differently than they thought about membership in 2006. I think in 2006, membership was lazy. It was something that people realized to your point, there were no better alternatives, and it just was what the offering was. And rather than think about innovating or offering somebody more with their membership, that's just what people did. If SoulCycle was to offer a membership, I don't think it would be a terrible thing. My question would be what is the added value for that membership? So what do you get for being a member rather than a pay-per-class? I think the way that you stick with the ethos is if our job was to create this great experience every time, then what experience are we creating? What are you getting in terms of a class plus? Is there a membership lounge where we help you meet other people or really hang with your community? Is there digital content? Is there special swag that you get every month for being a member? So if there were to be a membership, I think the question and the challenge would be how can we make you feel like even more a part of the community if we're going to charge you monthly?
So it makes sense that you would learn from your partner, people you work close with, but I was curious if you could tell us about a time where you learned from someone you didn't work closely with. So someone at the front desk, janitor, anybody, something that actually hit you and you're like, whoa, and it's like coming at a problem from another point of view. Someone says something and it clicks differently. So is there a time that you can tell us about?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of something really specific, but this happened all the time, and SoulCycle's a people business. It's just you are constantly they're small spaces. You're bumping into people. You're behind the front desk. You're out and about. I think one of the cool things about SoulCycle that they make every single employee do, from people who are coming in to work in the studios to C-level executives, is you have to work behind the front desk at a studio for between 2 and 3 weeks. And so when Julie welcomed me into Soul, she's like, no, you don't get your desk right off the bat. You have a schedule. You have to go around. And my job basically was to stand behind the desk. And when people handed in their sweaty shoes, my job was to spray their shoes.
Hazing.
So and it is kind of hazing, but
Nobody else sprayed the shoes. No, I'm
yeah,
kidding.
no, she just said make sure Spencer sprays shoes. And but it's incredible because you have exposure to, you see the way people operate behind the front desk. You see the way customers interact with people at the front desk. You hear how they choose their instructors. You hear how they recommend the classes to other riders and how they. And as a marketer, for me, having those interactions with people and talking to the cleaning staff and trying to understand what it looks like to get in and out of a class in a certain amount of time, it might either inform an idea or kill an idea I had. We started talking about, oh, maybe we should offer like lunchtime half-an-hour classes to get people in and out. And ultimately you decide not to do that because someone at the front desk says to you, hey, like, you know, we understand kind of the traffic patterns during the day. We don't think it would make sense to cut a class in half, charge less. It just doesn't work with our customers. And so you're always, and I think as a marketer, as an entrepreneur, you're always listening. You always have to have your ear to the ground because those insights come in in a minute. And if you're able to scoop something up, it literally can change your business overnight. So like listening and the ability to kind of take those insights and apply them quickly and test is really a great skill. Yeah, for sure.
I have two very quick ones for you. So in very early days, I was working at the studio. I was the only person that worked there. And I remember one day some woman came up to me after class and said that she really did not like the way the laundry detergent smelled on the towels. And I thought, okay, well, I literally had nothing to do. I had like this big job, and now I saw like 20 people a day. I was like, great, I'll figure out how to change the laundry detergent. So I did. I changed the laundry detergent. I told the people that were washing our towels we needed new detergent. And the next day, or maybe a couple days later, she came back and was shocked that I had changed the laundry detergent because who would ever listen to her? So she came to me and said, oh my God, the towel smells so much better. This is amazing. But then here's what was crazy. 5 or 10 or 15 more people came up to me and said, oh my God, the towel smells so much better. What did you do? Which taught me a really valuable lesson, which is this. If one person says it to you, 100 people are thinking it, but there are a lot more people that don't want to speak up and complain. So you really have to listen to what your customers say and take action on it, because you would be shocked how many people are thinking something that one person will express. And then one other thing that happened to me from another random place, and I literally keep a plaque on my computer now. Our third partner left us, or we had a really bad parting with her, and that didn't go that great. And at the time, SoulCycle was kind of becoming a big deal, and Page 6 in the New York Post likes to write a lot of crappy things about people. And so I was on the phone with a crisis PR person because we knew that the news was going to hit the next day that we were separating with our third partner, and we were a very young business, and at the time it seemed like the world was going to fall out from underneath us, And I remember thinking, and she was going to start another cycling studio. And we sort of found out in the craziest way that she, it was not a good situation. She was leaving, she was starting another cycling studio, they were going to be our competitor. And I remember being on the phone, with this PR person and just, losing it. And she said to me, here's the thing. She said, high road, long view. You do you, because that's the only thing that somebody else can't do. High road, long view. And, I have to say there are so many times, especially in an entrepreneurial journey, where the instinct is just to panic and to look around you and think well, they're also adding this, or they're going to sell juices, or maybe I should also do a treadmill workout or something else because other people are doing it. And I always think about that, and I always think about just staying in my own lane, keeping it graceful and keeping my head above water and just really focusing in on what I hear inside of me. Because the thing is, you can only create and build what is truly inside of you in an authentic and magical way. Nobody else will be able to build that. You can start to add things because other people are doing it. But I remember thinking that was really great advice, and I keep that on my computer, and I always think about that in times when I'm ready to panic.
We're in a kind of developing niche market, and similar to you guys when you were developing, maybe your expenses came, or the cost was a little too high for most people. So how did you convey the idea that your product gave more value than a cheaper alternative?
Well, we never compared it to a cheaper alternative, and we actually didn't apologize for it. We gave away tons of stuff in the beginning. I mean, we actually never spent any money on advertising or marketing, $0 while we were there. We just never, we felt like our marketing was, homegrown, organic, and really our best marketing was the fact that we always delivered. Our product was our marketing. But that all being said, we never apologized. We always said you were gonna get what you paid for, that we wanted to pay our employees well and create something that was really a great experience every single time. And what we did was we actually benchmarked it. So when we would talk about it in interviews or in the press or anything, we would always say, it's the price of 2 cocktails in New York. It's a couple mornings of Starbucks. It's much cheaper than personal training. And when you kind of benchmark it next to things that people can prioritize against it, they can kind of wrap their heads around, oh, it's 4 lattes, it's 2 cocktails, it's a quarter of the price of my trainer. And that was always the way that we put it into the world.
You have to make sure your product or experience lives up to the promise of your brand. And that was what really differentiated SoulCycle. People are willing to pay for the things that they value and that they find value in. And so if people feel that your service is delivering on something that they need, they will pay for it. And I think a lot of mistakes that entrepreneurs make is they try and underprice their product in order to attract more people, when in fact you can always move downward, but it's very, very difficult to go the opposite direction. So be careful about trying to undercut a business leader or trying to sell under. I'd focus on delivering a superior experience, offering better customer service, creating some hallmarks of the brand that really distinguish you so that you have the right and the ability to charge more for what you're offering.
Hi. So thanks for sharing. I was wondering, obviously, when you start a business, it's very hard. There's a lot to do. I was wondering how you were setting your goals, and how you coped with the fact that every single thing that you have to do, you don't necessarily have the skill set for. So, how did you cope with that?
In the beginning, everyone's a generalist. It really doesn't matter if you have the skill set or not. You have to make it happen. That's the bottom line. You figure it out. You make mistakes along the way. Elizabeth used to say to me all the time, whenever we would blow it, or we'd lose, we soundproofed our first studio wrong. It was an expensive mistake, or we would make tons of mistakes along the way, and she would say, it's okay. Neither of us paid for an MBA, so this is like our tuition, and that's the way she would write it off. But in the beginning, it's interesting. I think that you have to sort of, be the example of the fact that you are just going to gut it out until it's done. There is no going home. There is no sleeping. There is no, you're making it happen. I mean, I remember thinking to myself in the beginning, people used to say to me, do you think it's going to work? And I used to say, you know what? I'm not going to let it not work. That's the thing. I'm not sure that it's going to work, but I can tell you that if you give me a number of people that have to come here a day, they are going to come here. Because if I have to walk up and down the streets of Manhattan and give it away, which by the way I did, I will get those people in here, and even if I have to comp them today, tomorrow they'll bring a friend, and then they'll bring a friend, and so you make it happen. But in the beginning, you hire generalists, people that are just willing to work hard, that are just passionate about the idea, and will just stay and figure it out until you make it happen. And then as you begin to scale, you will need people that can go deeper, not wider, right? So once you have 50 locations, you need a real marketer, or you need a real COO that understands how to build org charts and field organizations and whatever. In the beginning, everybody wears every hat, and then as you get more successful, you begin to bring in specialists who can go deeper on jobs. But when you start, it's just on-the-job learning. That's the thing. Just be willing to learn. That was one of the things for us, I think, that was really valuable about the entertainment business. You just figured it out. I mean, there was no telling the agent that you worked for that you didn't know. Yeah. That wasn't happening. You just figured it out.
Passion, resourcefulness, and resilience. I think those are the things that you look for in people that you're hiring, people who can solve problems, people who know how to turn a no into a yes, and people who can sell. Any job you're ever going to have, you're going to be selling. I don't care what it is. It could be to a person, it could be to another business. And in the early days, people who can effectively sell, people who can come up with ideas, sell them through, are going to succeed. And then just in terms of organizing like your priorities and getting your stuff done, I mean, there's so much thought about this, but carving out big chunks of undistracted time to focus on the bigger projects it's like a cliche at this point, but it is so important. We used to call it in our marketing organization, eat the frog, which is like, you take the worst part of your to-do list that you've been staring at and you know you should be doing, but you're leaving it because it's the biggest thing, and that's the first thing you have to work on in the day. You carve out some time not to touch your email, not to touch your phone, spend 2 or 3 undistracted hours and knock that thing out. And it takes practice, and it's torturous, and you have to force yourself to do it. You know what it is. You know what you have to do that day. You know what the number one priority is. Do it.
Hi, thank you for coming. You two have worked together and were successful in doing so. So I wanted to know if you would recommend starting a business with a family member or a partner, and if you do, what advice would you give to familial partnerships?
It is not easy being married to an entrepreneur. I'm just saying that. Like, it's really hard. Like, Julie, in the first couple of years of Soul,
Best life ever.
no, it's amazing. I mean, it's worked out, but it's really challenging. And I mean, Julie would literally get up at like 5:30 on Saturdays, and she'd be like getting up and getting out of bed. I'm like, where are you going? She's like, if I don't take the trash out this morning, it's not going out. So I have to get up and do it. And she really worked tirelessly for 10 years, really. Starting a business with a family member, a spouse, it's really tricky. It's complicated, because I think the most challenging part of a partnership is having to make joint decisions. And starting a business is like renovating a home or having children. You just have to make more decisions, and it is so difficult for two people to be on the same page. So for me, you have to make sure your relationship is already on rock solid ground, like really solid. You have to be very open and honest with the person about the fact that, like, and Julie and I talk about this as our marriage. Like we're in our marriage. We have made a commitment, and we know we are going to have great times and we are going to have really not so great times. But the long view of like, we're in this together and this thing is going to succeed and we're going to make it work no matter how much work it takes, that is kind of critical to having faith in each other and trusting one another. And I think the same thing goes for starting a business. You just have to really put it out there. Would I recommend it? It's not for the faint of heart. I'll say that. It's hard. Look, I didn't start SoulCycle with Julie, and so that's something that's really important. Like, I got to kind of be a loose advisor of the business when Julie started it, and like give my point of view when she would actually listen to it, which was very infrequently. But I joined late, and then after we left SoulCycle, we sat in an office and tried to start another startup, and it was a real struggle. It was really hard. We were kind of both banging our heads against the wall. And it's just challenging, so again, I say proceed, but proceed with caution.
Thank you for coming. Are there any thought exercises that help you refine the values that are important to your company?
Thought exercises?
Yeah, like how did you just go about that process of like picking the few ones?
It's interesting. I think that the core values of most companies are really just a reflection of the core values of their founders. Right? So if I had to really describe myself and the things that are most important to me in my life, I am so passionate about community, about being a part of a community, about nurturing a community, about making sure that people are together and feel connection with each other. I'm that person in our family, I'm that person in my life, with my friends, with our neighborhood. And so I think that a lot of times core values, I think, just come from who you are. And I think that, again, not dissimilar to the advice that we spoke about over here, I think if you really look inside yourself when you're creating a company, I think that you can find most of the core values inside of you. I think if you look at the way that you live your life, they're probably stacked right there. I think it's about taking the time, though, to sit down with a piece of paper and actually figure out what are the most important things to you in your life. What is the legacy you want to leave in the world? How do you want other people to be treated? What is it that you like to do with your time, you know? And I think if you can answer some of those questions, but actually write them down and then form really cohesive, you know, words and sentences around them, and then begin to articulate them to the rest of your organization. Because the thing is, the way your core values are in you, where they get lost in translation is actually putting them down, articulating them to the rest of your company, and then making sure that people are actually living them. I find that one of the most frustrating things for me is, you know, in 2020, it feels like everybody has a mission statement on the wall. You know, everybody has put words up on the wall, and it's great. People have thought about it, people have articulated it, and then where it seems to fall off is actually taking the time to make sure that people learn what that mission is and are actually executing on it. Because it takes work to execute on values. It's a lot easier to live our lives in our own silos, doing whatever we want, saying whatever we want, making our own decisions, not listening to the person next to us. What takes time is to actually live in those mission statements and values, and I think that's really important, is the execution on them.
That was the perfect question and the perfect answer for this course. That is assignment number 3, you realize that, right? Is developing your personal philosophy and writing it down and figuring out your core values and making this real. I couldn't have framed it any better for her to do that. One of the values that sort of comes through, you talked about SoulCycle and family, and at USC we talk about the Trojan family, and today has really been what a gift to have your family with us all day and spend time with them. So being family and connected this way now, you and Elizabeth have now been here 3 times. So a gift with purchase is sort of been earned. But no, we can't thank you enough for being here and for sharing so much of your story and the SoulCycle story with us. There really is a masterclass on not just starting a business, but how to build a great life here. Please help me thank Julie and Spence for coming.